In every ad I see from North Face, I'm hit with some sort of cinematic adventure for a scenic, snowy mountain range. But in the recent years, I've seen an awful lot of North Face and not a lot of mountains. North Face has seemingly jumped from outdoor wear to chav essentials and now to what some would call edgy fashion. In this video, I'm going to explore the original story behind the North Face brand, whilst also going on to investigate what seems to have happened to it over the recent decade. Everything started in San Francisco, 1966, when the hiking enthusiast and college dropout Douglas Tompkins and his wife Susie put together their savings to open a small mountaineering retail store by the beach. At first, the company was selling rock climbing and camping equipment, with the vision to get rid of all extra gizmo gadgets and instead promise to provide only practical equipment. The shop was located between bars and clubs on each side, and no differently, the shop would also often indulge in live music to attract customers off the street. During the 1960s, the shop's popularity continued growing and acquired the name the North Face, referring to that of the north side of the mountain, often being the hardest to climb. The shop also developed its popular three-column logo that symbolised the half-dome landform in Yosemite National Park. This logo was first put to use after Douglas and Susie moved to another shop within San Francisco to begin manufacturing their own mountaineering apparel and equipment that at first consisted of backpacks, tents and singular coats. The shop had now become a brand that quickly embedded itself into the dirtbag community, and in no time, North Face began sponsoring expeditions across the globe from where it first gained its motto, "Never Stop Exploring." In October 1966, North Face were to release their new and first winter range and needed a way to create a crowd. Doug and his good friend Fionn bought a bunch of beer, a bunch of weed, and hired the Grateful Dead band to come to perform at their shop to amass a crowd. By the end of the night, a crowd was overflowing out the shop onto the streets, and Doug had to hire the Hells Angels motorbike gang to keep everything under control. Following a number of similar events at the original North Face shop, the brand had well and truly made its mark in the industry. This led to the opening of more locations within California and consequently a bunch more customers. But surprisingly, this isn't what Doug wanted. At heart, Doug was an explorer and an adventurer. He quoted, "What am I doing? Here I am in a sport that I love, but I end up having to talk equipment with everybody." In 1967, less than 2 years after beginning the business, Tompkins sold the North Face brand for $50,000 to Kenneth Klopp and pursued a 6-month adventure to Patagonia. Kenneth Klopp, the new owner of North Face, who's better known as Hap, was a graduate from Stanford Business School and prior to taking hold of North Face was working at a ski shop in California. Hap continued in Doug's footsteps of simplicity. However, during the 70s, North Face began popularising Gore-Tex within their products and even for a small length of time partnered with Apple, modelled recently by Drake. At this point, North Face was still hand manufacturing its own products, and you may initially think this would mean that they couldn't keep up with their growing demand, but it was actually the opposite. Because North Face hadn't yet modelled accurately how much they ought to make, they had ended up overproducing a lot of their goods, which forced them to having to sell these at discounted rates, which consequently reduced the prestige and value of the brand. This, however, was not the point where Chav started to wear it. In 1988, North Face again changed hands and was acquired by Odyssey Holdings, who also owned a number of other brands at the time. During this ownership, Odyssey was able to revive North Face for externalising production, putting an end to discounting items, and even making some management changes that all combined meant lower prices and greater profitability for the brand. Unfortunately, only 6 years later, Odyssey filed for bankruptcy and meant in 1994, North Face became an independent brand again. Kicking off this new start, North Face had a successful IPO in July of 1966 that raised upwards of $35 million, and followingly, North Face began to open small stores they would call summit shops. These shops were used as ways to show off their new products and grab foot traffic attention. This made them particularly helpful in 1991 when North Face first released Steep Tech, that at the time was a cool ski wear line, but has since evolved to become one of the most fashionable outfits on the streets, following multiple collabs with streetwear giant Supreme. North Face, seemingly saved from disaster already, had yet again found itself in a make or break position. Following accounting errors at the end of the 90s, many high positioned employees left and North Face's stocks were cut in half, leaving the brand to consider bankruptcy. Bankruptcy was not needed, however, as in the 2000s, an apparel company by the name of VF Corporations bought North Face for a spenny $25 million and injected money into the brand until it was healthy and growing again. To this day, VF Corporations continues to own North Face, along with a number of other brands such as Dickies, Vans and Supreme. But even still, that can't explain why the brand has jumped from the mountains to the streets of London. Within the 1990s, when the Steep Tech jackets were first released, these were also introduced to the streets of New York, originally through the Wu-Tang Clan's music video for Method Men, and also through a number of also very popular music videos in the USA. The Steep jackets were capable of keeping the men of the streets warm, dry, and looking stylish, whilst also being filled with pockets that I've read meant for easy places to hide weed. These jackets became so highly regarded within the New York City streets that wearing one was seen as putting yourself at risk following the amount of people being jumped for them. North Face Steep Tech was delisted in 1998, but was soon revamped in the 2000s with a focus for the urban streets. To achieve this, larger size ranges for the coats were brought out, a larger line of cheaper hoodies were released, and the goods were sold at streetwear shops as opposed to exclusively outdoor adventure shops. Supreme had additionally popularised North Face to the street fashion subculture. The two brands first made a collab in the fall of 2007, where Supreme added a bit of spice to a pair of North Face jackets. These understandably became hugely in demand, and since then, each and every year, we see a Supreme collab that never misses to get collectors, resellers, and Drake excited. Although the introduction of North Face to streetwear did not lead North Face to where it is today, as I mentioned, as North Face noticed their goods increasingly being used within the urban world, they also began to cater for this. Cheaper clothes, large ranges, and more styles. This meant those who couldn't afford the popular garms that the fashion heads would wear could at least afford the cheaper substitutes that still had the logo on the arm and the chest. Boom. North Face could now be worn by chavs, but not chavs exclusively, because people who still think they're fashionable can still buy expensive North Face Puffcoats, and they do. Now, to make it clear, whilst North Face no longer dominates the ski world, this is because there are now other competitors. North Face over the years has not deteriorated, but instead has diversified, and consequently, the not so idyllic North Face is most commonly the North Face you are going to see. If you did enjoy this video, please do subscribe. Thank you very much.